Hi, everyone. Welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. On this episode, delighted to be having, I believe, coffee or at least a mug-like beverage with writer, creator Tom Sniegoski.
Perfect.
We tried. We tried. All
Perfect.
right. Well, I'll mention a couple of works here and then we can sort of dive in a little bit. You've
Sure.
co-written a lot with one Mr. Christopher Golden, I believe. Work inside and outside of the Buffyverse, a series called The Menagerie, the Fallen series. You've written for older readers, young adult readers. You've written comics, the Owlboy series, and you've also created in the world of Bone. And that's just a brief overview. There are other places that you've created and other stories you've told as well.
Yep. That's it.
Yeah, yeah. Does that tap the oeuvre, or is
Yeah, yeah,
there?
pretty much. Yeah,
Yeah,
I've pretty much like touched everything, you know.
yeah.
Hellboy. I've been in the Hell, worked on the Hellboy
Yes.
universe with Mignola and Chris, and yeah. So yeah, I pretty much got the opportunity to write almost everything that I've ever really wanted to write. So
That's
that's kind of
awesome.
nice. That's nice. Yeah, that's really
Yeah,
nice.
yeah. Any parts of the landscape that you haven't yet touched that you would
Oh
like to?
wow. There are more characters that I haven't had a quite had the chance to play with yet that I really, really want to. Uh,
Hmm.
recently, like over the last couple of months, I got the the Herculoids was one of the big things that I've always wanted to write. Even when I first started like working in comics, I would always ask people, "Who owns that? Who owns that? Who has the license for the Herculoids? I'd love to write the Herculoids." So the
Hmm.
fact that I'm actually getting to write these characters, that's really, really cool.
That's
Um,
a good company to spend the day with, I'm sure.
yeah. It's a lot of fun. That's what I was doing all day today. Um, Kolchak, Carl Kolchak of the Night
Hmm.
Stalker. That's the one that's eluded me so far. That's the one that I'm trying for now.
Nice, nice. Yeah, that there are a couple of different projects that have been released over the past couple of
Yeah,
years with
yeah,
Kolchak. So,
yeah. Because
yeah, that would be great to
oh,
see.
I know. I hope I get the opportunity. It'd be really fun.
Yeah, yeah. What connected you with storytelling? And is that a Frank Frazetta
Calendar?
calendar back there? Yeah,
Yes, that is a
I
present.
thought so. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. There's another one in the kitchen. Um,
nice.
Uh, you know what? I was always fascinated with telling stories, even as a little kid, when you don't even know what you're doing. I would
Mm,
I would use my like toys, action figures, whatever you want to call them at the time, to tell stories that I would actually continue.
love
It's
it. Yeah.
yeah, so I was even doing sequential storytelling in a way then with my action figures before I even like knew what how to write a comic or script a comic or write a book or script a video game or whatever. But I was like breaking it down like cliffhangers. I would like stop playing at a cliffhanger and pick it up again the next day.
Love
So
it.
I mean, always there was some fascination with telling stories. Even before I knew how to type, I can remember sitting at a old-fashioned typewriter, like like telling stories with no punctuation.
Hmm.
Just like trying to like get it out of my head onto a piece of paper.
I
So
believe that is Cormac McCarthy style. I believe is what that is.
yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I love that. I used to also do the same thing of taking action figures, and I used to have the cassettes that would go
Oh,
with many of the films,
okay, yeah.
like to have the soundtrack going at the same time.
Oh yeah,
So,
that's
yeah.
cool. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I didn't have that then.
Now you've written in comics and prose, as I mentioned, and I
Yep.
always like to ask process and approach questions. Are there changes that you undertake when you're moving from one form to the
Yeah,
other?
yeah. I think prose storytelling is a lot more difficult,
Hmm.
probably because of it's a lot more brain power required when you're writing prose. Like I just finished a novella for Bad Hand Books, a new series that I'm going to be doing with my writing partner, Janine Atchison. And we jump, Janine and I jump back and forth between comics and this prose stuff. And
Hmm.
it's almost like you can feel the gears grinding. Like, one day I was working on the Herculoids, and then the next day it's back to the prose, and you could feel like the machinations in my brain grinding, kind of grinding together to get back into the swing of prose writing.
Yeah.
Um, I think you spend I think with prose writing, you spend a lot more time in your head.
Hmm.
Whereas when you're writing comics, it it seems more freewheeling. I mean, there's more fun, I think, in comic book writing because you know that somebody else is going to take what you have talked about, be it descriptions in your breakdowns and your script to the artist, that the artist is going to take that and visualize it and
Hmm.
and send something back to you showing you, what he and how he interpreted your words on a script page. So comics, I've always associated comics with more fun. Not
Hmm.
not that prose writing isn't fun. It is, but it's just a different kind of fun.
Yeah.
I think it requires more brain power than comics does. Comics, because again, comics, you're always going to be working with somebody else
Yeah.
with comics. I'm not an artist, so I know that somebody else is going to be carrying part of that load of,
Hmm.
of the storytelling. So it's not quite as difficult um, to tell a story because you've got that visual um, aspect coming after the fact.
Yeah.
Whereas prose writing, it's all you. You're you're
Hmm.
you're painting that picture. You're painting that picture. You're speaking those words. I mean, you really got to do a lot of work to get what you're trying to do across with the prose stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no in between, no
Yeah.
translation, none of that. An editor, certainly, but yeah.
Oh yeah, an editor is your best friend.
Uh-huh.
I mean, yeah, you may hate them at the time, but but when you're finally able to step back a little bit, you're like, you know what, they were right.
Yeah.
This needed to be massaged. This needed to be cut back. This needed, yeah. It's never pretty when you're working on the actual project and the editor gets their hands on it and tells you all the stuff that's they perceive to be wrong with it or how
Hmm.
better. That's incredibly agitating. Especially like when the project is fresh,
Yeah.
when you're either just finished with it, and you don't want to see it again to know that you have to go back to it and tweak it and poke it. That's you get so furious. They don't know what they're talking about.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, they
right.
do. Yeah, they do.
Well, on the comic side, you've worked with some of my favorite people, Mike Mignola being one of those. His world is amazing. I remember encountering
Totally.
his adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Francis Ford Coppola. That was my first
Yeah,
glimpse of his work.
yeah.
I've never met him, but I imagine he's a very interesting person to work with.
He is. He is. He's fast. He's one of those guys that in the course of 15 minutes has more ideas than I'll have in a month. And you can talk to him on the phone and literally have multiple projects birth themselves in just a casual conversation with
Wow.
it's
Yeah.
amazing. He must always be thinking. He must always be formulating. It just seems so easy. I
Mhm.
kill myself to plot something. I mean, it takes me like, depending on what the project is, it could take me like a month to come up with the basic plot line for something. Where he does it in a phone call. It's
Yeah.
it's fascinating, and he's been doing it for a long time. To still be able to be that fresh and that awesome in terms of the ideas. You just sit there and you go, wow, why didn't I think of that? Why, where
Mm.
did that?
Mhm.
Yeah, he's amazing. He's
Yeah.
amazing.
And now I have met Jeff Smith. Jeff Smith has
Yes.
been on the show, and I've met him in person at conventions.
Yep.
And he, from everything that I've seen, is just a wonderful, kind soul. So what's the process and what's the experience been like with him?
He's another one that I just like pinch myself that I actually had an opportunity to work with him. He's very he's very hands-on at first in terms of like when you're coming up with the concepts and the ideas. And then
Hmm.
once he sees what your plan is and he kind of gets into the groove with what you're doing, he basically just steps back and lets you go, which is kind of neat. But again, I mean, in all these processes, when you're working with somebody, um, they'll always, you know, put their stamp on it after the fact. They'll always like go through it to make sure that it works 100% for them. I've never had it in terms of like the various people that I've worked with, like Mignola or Jeff. Um, they've never been terribly on hands. I mean, they like to see what you're planning. They like to see
Hmm.
what you're doing, but then they step back, which has been really, really nice because it allows you to kind of do your thing
Yeah,
and not feel like, oh, I got to do it just like they do it. They're
yeah.
really willing to let you kind of put yourself, a piece of yourself into it. So it's not just a Jeff Smith copy. A little bit of, like the stuff that Jeff and I have done. There's definitely a merger, like an amalgam of me and him
Mhm.
in in the stories, and it's really kind of that's cool. That's really cool.
That is cool. And, that's the mark of a generous creator, too. Someone that
Yeah,
says, this is
yeah,
my world, welcome to it, but please bring
yeah,
something.
yeah, definitely. I mean, it was the oddest thing when I first worked with him. The first thing that I did for him, I did some backup stories that were in the actual original Bone comics
Hmm.
with Stan Sakai, which were he Jeff was like Jeff just wanted something kind of goofy and fun in the back of Bone. Like he wanted all I guess he had a certain page count that he wanted to cover in each of the issues. And he says, how about doing a backup? Do like 6 pages for X amount of issues, and you can work with Stan, which
Hmm.
was like amazing thing. So I did that, and that went over really well. That was a lot of fun to do. But then I don't even know how much longer it was, but I got a phone call out of the blue from Vijaya, Jeff's wife, who said, "Do you want to write the Bone prequel?" And it's kind of like, "Oh, well, let me check my schedule."
Right.
So yeah, that was totally like he had an idea of a character, like Big Johnson Bone was his character, and he was like, well, what do you think? What do we want to do? He says I kind of see Big Johnson as kind of a tall tales type character, like Paul Bunyan and blah blah. So I kind of ran with that and kind of came up with some crazy stuff, and then he was on a pod. It wasn't a podcast then. It must have been just like an interview, like a phone interview show, and he talked about the plot, and it wasn't my plot. There were elements in this idea that I didn't know about.
There
And
you go.
he was like, "Oh, this is in this miniseries, we're going to show how the rat creatures lost their tails." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? That's we don't have that. That's not in there." But it had to. The story had to change, so that became part of the story.
There it is.
So
Yeah,
it must have
no.
been something that he was thinking about that he just didn't mention.
Hmm.
Just
Hmm.
fine. Which is fine.
Yeah, yeah. I would definitely include if Jeff Smith was going to ask me to create something, anything he wanted,
Oh yeah.
anything.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I don't even know how far I'd gotten in the actual process of coming up with what the plot of that story would be. So, but it was pretty funny to suddenly have an element that I knew nothing about. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I better come up with a reason. I better come up with a reason as to why they lost their tails.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So curious, you mentioned working on Herculoids. Curious
Yeah.
about what currently is on the creative agenda. What has your focus at the moment that you can talk about?
Herculoids is the number one thing that I've
Mhm.
that I've been working on, trying to keep that on scale. I'm working with Craig Rousseau on that for Dynamite, and that's been a blast. Craig's an amazing artist.
Love his style, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, he's got this great it's this great sense of nostalgia, but at the same time, it's like fresh. There's like this
Hmm.
is a so when you look at what he's doing with the Herculoids, it brings you back to sitting in front of the TV set watching those cartoons. But there's enough of a difference to it to kind of like a freshness to it to kind of take you to the next level. I mean, I don't know, it's great. I love what he's doing with it. I'm doing that, and I'm doing a new Vampirella book for Dynamite also,
Cool, cool.
which has been a lot of fun. That was announced a while ago and hasn't been talked about since, but since it was announced a while ago, I can talk about it. And so, yeah, I'm doing that. And the company that's doing that novella that I mentioned, it's called
Hmm.
Bad Hand Books is the name of the company, and I'm gonna be doing. Mike Mignola and I had written a novel called Grim Death and Bill the Electrocuted Criminal,
Hmm. Love
and
that title, yeah.
yeah, that's a Mike title. What this is what it's called. I'm like, oh, all right. Uh, Bad Hand Books is actually just released a new edition of Grim Death. It was published originally by St. Martin's in 2017. So Bad Hand just released a new edition of Grim Death, and I'm going to be doing new Grim Death novellas.
Oh,
So
cool.
I'm going to get to kind of do my Shadow, my Spider, my Doc Savage. I'm going to get to tell us a series of stories that Mike will plot with me, and actually my writing partner Janine Atchison will be writing those with me. So probably sometime in 2025, there'll be the first of the new Grim Death stories.
It's nice. I'm glad to hear that that series is continuing.
Yeah, oh, me too. I mean, it was one of those things where when it first came out, I had Mike and I had every intention of doing more, but in typical big publisher fashion, they just kind of tossed it out there and nobody knew it existed. And they were like, oh, no one wants this. It didn't sell. Well, nobody knows it exists, so how could it sell? And they just kind of hemmed and hawed, and I just waited until I got the rights back. So
Nice, nice. Imagine you have to actually tell people that something is out in the world. Imagine that, the promotion
yeah,
side of
yeah.
it.
And honestly, I really don't know how big publishing works anymore because it's terrifying. So many people that I know who write prose and things, it's a nightmare. They slave on these books for, a year and a half, and they the publishers put them out and just it's almost like, all right, they just kind
Mhm.
of toss it out and move on to the new celebrity cookbook. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of depressing. Kind of
Hmm.
depressing. But Bad Hand, which is a small press, small publisher, relatively new, are fantastic. This guy, Doug Morano is the name of the publisher and editor. It's like a one-man show, and he is so excited about this stuff that it's like contagious. You talk to him, and you can't wait to write something for him because he's just so excited about everything, like the certain kinds of storytelling, and yeah, he's amazing. I'm really enjoying my return to prose with him.
Very cool. Glad to
Yeah,
hear that's on the way. And
yeah,
speaking of letting people know that things are on the way, I always like to ask, what are the best spaces online if someone wants to follow along? I know you have a website.
yeah.
Um,
That's an old website, but yeah, you can go on there. Facebook. I'm on
mhm.
Facebook. Thomas Sniegoski. Um, I'm on Twitter. I don't know how much longer I'll be on there. Um, Blue Sky.
Mhm.
Tom Sniegoski. Look it up on Blue Sky. Instagram. I'm on Instagram showing pictures of my stupid dog. Um,
That's what Instagram is
I
for.
know. Instagram is like stupid dog and toys in my office. There you go.
Love it.
That's
Love it.
all I really. Maybe some cool artwork that somebody sends me.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect.
But I'm around.
Well, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I just said I'm around. There aren't many Sniegoskis out there, so as long as you get the last name spelt right, you're most likely going to find me.
Well, as a final question, unless there's
How do you
anything that
spell
we've
it?
missed. Oh, well, no, I wasn't going to ask that because I'll actually spell it for listeners. But I believe if I have it recorded correctly here, you got an S and an N and an I and an E and a G and an O and an S and a K and an I.
That's it.
There it is.
That's it.
Yeah. Well, I was actually going to ask, since you mentioned sharing images of your toys in the office, what
Yes.
the current prized toy happens to be.
Oh God. Oh geez. I don't even. Probably the incredibly expensive Herculoids toys that I had to own in order to write this series.
Yes.
My brain said, no, you need these. Yes, it's incredibly expensive. You can mortgage a house, but you you need these toys. So yeah, that was a huge investment.
Surely the publisher provided.
No,
I didn't
no.
think
I
so. I didn't think
wish,
so.
I wish, but no, no.
I understand one has to be able to inhabit the world and
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
it's like, not only do you watch the cartoon, that was an interesting thing today. I was thinking, I had to watch one of the episodes of the show in order to work on the current script I'm working on, and I was like, this is my job. I'm watching cartoons. This is crazy. And then I'm going to go in the office. I'm going to write new stuff based on this cartoon. That's even crazier.
That's the
Yeah,
dream. That
yeah,
is
it
the
really
dream.
is. It really is. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, and I also love that you are invested in the continuity enough that makes a difference because it,
Yeah.
it comes through when someone knows the world they're writing in.
Yeah, I think honestly, I think if you're going to do this kind of thing, you kind of have to know where it came from. The world in which it exists. You know what I mean? Because why bother? If it's not what you remember as a kid, um, then it's not the same thing. It's not doesn't have the flavor. You need that flavor of like what made this exciting to you when you were 6, you know.
Exactly. Exactly. Uh, well, anything else that we might have missed before I remind people that it's a S followed by an N followed by an I followed by an E followed by a G followed by an O-S-K-I.
Yeah, there you
We're
go.
gonna we're gonna make a song by the end of this episode.
I
That's
know
what
it
I know.
sounds like it does sound like fun. Yeah. Let me think. Is there anything that I didn't talk about? Well, I have a new novella called Nera coming out sometime within the next month or two through Bad Hand Books. And that's with my writing partner, Janine Atchison. And that's the start of another new like urban fantasy series that I'm going to be doing for them. So I'm trying to get all my writing. I'm doing my comics, I'm doing my prose. I'm trying to balance them out so I
I
so I
love
don't
it.
get flabby in either of them.
I love that things are continuing to come out and that you're adding to the world of fandom.
Yeah.
And glad to have you back anytime to talk comics and prose and anything else you decide to write.
Maybe I'll drag my writing partner with me. She
By all
she
means.
she she would love to do that. Maybe when Nera is actually released, we'll come on and we'll talk about Nera.
It is a plan. It is a plan. Absolutely.
Okay, excellent.
All right.